Hi, I'm Jason Malicki, and I am here with André Smaal, Vice President of Europe at TBM Consulting, to talk about precision of execution. Um, Andre, so to start us out, can you just describe to us what you mean by the concept of precision of execution? It sounds like a familiar phrase, but I'm sure that some people watching this webinar aren't familiar with it. So talk to us about it.
Sure, Jason. Nice to talk about this topic, which is got close to our heart. What do we mean by precision of execution? As it sounds like a familiar phrase, but it's still in operations. It's a not an easy concept, because precision of execution, it's really talking about a set of behaviors, process, discipline, and standards and structures that all must be in place within an organization, and also think manufacturing environment, for companies to successfully operate their operations, their organization, and to continuously improve their end performance and implement those changes that will lead to significant improvements and actually to sustain in the future. So at the basis, it's having the right foundation for change.
You wrote an article in the Supply Chain Digital. You outlined 5 pieces of advice to help drive this type of operational change. Can you share those with us here, and then talk a little bit about each one?
Yes, for sure, for sure. So that's just to remind, so the one thing that stands out, and as you know, I've worked with companies as well, and having them guide through changes. First thing, it's get the support from the top. And it sounds simple, but support from the top means literally embracing it and being able to spend time on the required changes that are required to get precision of execution. So that goes a long way. It's not just a statement that one time standing and speaking in front of a town hall. It's really embracing the change that's required. So that support is pediment. Then we talk about employee engagement, which is about getting from the support of the top, getting all the employees engaged in the journey that is ahead. A very complex concept that we're talking about is the third topic, which is review operations around the clock. This is one that is, it's just a couple of words, but this is at the essence of what we call operational process controls. Depending on the type of operation and that you're trying to manage, making sure that you measure at the right level. So this is about having the right key performance indicators. Everybody talks about key performance indicators and having the right ones. But typically what we see is organizations look at their KPIs on a monthly basis, at best at weekly level. And already that is the level is too low, or too high, I should say. It really goes about doing this around the clock. What was the performance the last half hour? Because as soon as any operation, there are variations happening in their operations, and you want to capture and learn from that. And this is where people are talking about data and information. So reviewing that performance around the clock is a very important topic, and not just to review it, but also to act upon it. And this is where the fourth topic comes in place when we talk about make it visible. This is about having performance boards that are bringing the operations that is reviewed around the clock, that come alive. The employees are engaged around the information that is now captured. And when you get the managers involved, this is where you get the support from the top. So the make it visible brings everything together. And that brings us to the last topic, that is encourage immediate action. And this is where we at TBM are helping the organization significantly. This is time-based management, how to now take action on the information that you've captured in the terms of key performance indicators, the right ones, at the right levels. They are being reviewed and they're being actioned. So those are the five topics, Jason, and yeah, it starts from the top, but at the end, immersing that across the organization, using the data that actually is right in front of organizations when they run an operation.
Um, Thank you. That's super helpful. One thing you said in there I want to dive into is that we didn't actually talk about is the right KPIs. And I'm just curious in your experience when you come into to companies and you see them measuring, what are the wrong KPIs? What are the KPIs you see show up where you're like, why in the world are they measuring that? Um,
That's a
just
very good.
curious.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And what I alluded to is typically the level of KPI. The KPI itself is the right one. So I mean, if not, I mean, typically the KPIs are not that wrong. The frequency of how they're measured is wrong.
Okay.
So the level. So typically you see organizations, they have management teams, and when we talk about the executives, they have a dashboard or a KPI platform, but it's about lagging indicators. And what we're now talking, at the end of the day, that's not what you can impact. What was last month revenue? Yeah, okay, the revenue. It's such a high KPI, for an example. So that KPI is too high, and when
Yeah.
the KPI is too high, then you cannot act because it's lagging.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's where you need to get. That's when we say, when we look at KPIs, we want to have them around the clock. So when you're producing widgets, you have a machine that's producing 100 widgets an hour. If within that hour it's only producing 80, now you have data points saying, okay, we lost 20 widgets. Where did we lose them? What happened? Yeah, we had a changeover, we had a maintenance breakdown. Okay, now we can ask more questions, and we say, 5 times why to get to what is the root cause. And then if you do this over across 1 week time frame, for example, and you see, okay, every hour we have a short maintenance breakdown. At a certain moment, you see a trend. It's this pump, it's this motor, it's the way the machine has been landed. So you start to find the root causes of that issue. And if you then resolve that, then your output in widgets starts to increase automatically because you're resolving the root causes. Yeah?
Well, it's interesting. It sounds like it's the combination. It's not that they have, it's they're measuring the wrong things. They're measuring lagging indicators too infrequently. And you're saying, no, you need to measure leading indicators. You need to measure them all the time.
Yeah.
Um, let's change gears a little bit. I want to hear you talk a little bit about, you talk a lot about a culture of operational excellence, and how operational leaders need to be hands-on to make that happen, in terms of support from the top. What does that look like? I mean, can you offer some specifics? Like how should an operational leader best show their commitment to this type of operational
Yeah.
excellence? What
Yeah.
should they be doing?
Yeah, and this is now, you're asked. This is it's a great question. We get it a lot, and it's like, okay,
Yeah,
what do I need to do different as an executive? Um, and obviously, you're talking about behavior,
yeah,
um, but it's really about, when as an executive, how do I show commitment to employees? And that's part of the
yes.
the, the, the question that gets you to an answer, which is both a simple and a complicated answer. Uh, It's like, as I would almost say, how do you show your partner that you care and are committed in the relation? If you compare it to a personal situation, it's the same kind of question. So, because if you think about in that sense, it's similar in a company. It's spend time with the people, compliment on their progress, efforts, and give them feedback on both positive and incorrect behavior. Because people love feedback if it's giving in the right terms and in the right situation, and if it's timely again. So people don't like feedback from 3 months ago when an incident happened, and there was no feedback at the time, and then 3 months later they hear about it. So I think related back to a personal
Yeah.
situation. Um,
And you're
yeah,
no, I was gonna say what you're saying is they're intertwined. So this preference to have them reviewing operations around the clock, measuring what's working frequently,
Yeah.
then creates a feedback loop for them. They can go have a real-time conversation about what's going on and offer feedback now versus waiting till months after it's happened. So the two
Correct.
things work hand in hand.
Yeah, that so, and it relates from that commitment from the top argument as well. It means that the executives need to spend time on the floor with the right people, and this is typically which is we use it, obviously, the terminology, go to the Gemba, go where the operation is taking place. And being on the floor is just, it's a challenging topic because there is so much to be done in the executive office, so many reviews, so many reviewing of KPIs, for example. Well,
Yeah.
we've heard it so many times. Just going to the shop floor and you actually find why things are not happening the way you're expecting on your lagging indicators. So connecting the dots between what's happening on the floor, which is people acting on the floor, that correlation is typically, that is already a big driver for change. Now, if you connect it with all the other elements, you get precision of execution, and you remove waste in several different ways from your organization.
Let's shift gears again. I'm curious about organizational structures. You talk a lot about the importance of having the right organizational structure in order to develop a performance-driven culture. So talk to us about what does that look like in a manufacturing operations setting? Like, what does that org structure, what does the right organizational structure look like to drive precision of execution?
Yeah, and it's typically an answer or a question that raises the answer in the sense of it depends, right? It's the answer I really don't like to give, but it actually is the situation. It really depends where you are in your organizational development, how mature the people are, your average tenure of people within the organization. All these different elements matter with regards to, what is the best organizational structure for us as an organization, as our manufacturing environment. Because typically, it's not the organizational chart. It's not the org chart that makes or breaks a company. Because typically what we walk into a manufacturing environment, and there are quite a lot of people that on the org chart, from an org chart perspective, they seem to be the leaders. And actually, we see a layer below the org from an org chart perspective. We see, and we deal with these people and we work with them very closely, and they are your future leaders. And this is typically what we see. So after an engagement and you see the first steps towards precision of execution, an organization that starts to perform, there's continuous improvement. There's actually another layer of leaders that have stood up and taking the so the org chart needs to be then reviewed because at the end you have new leaders now developed that have grown out.
Before we move on, I want to go back and I just want you to describe to us when a company is performing at its peak from a precision perspective. It has the behaviors, it has the process discipline, it has the standards and structures in place. Leadership is engaged, employees are engaged, they're measuring around the clock. What does that feel like? I mean, how does that feel different? So an organization that goes through this type of transformation, how does that change maybe the culture and the feel of the company?
It's a very good question. It's typically what we ask people at the beginning. Okay, so when you are in production, so please describe to us what does a good day look like. And to be honest, a lot of time we get the feedback when we start in the engagement and at the forefront, we get the answer, oh, we don't have a lot of those days. but when we have a good day is the day when, operations running smoothly, not too many disruptions, not too many changeovers, definitely no maintenance breakdowns or equipment breakdowns. So things are running smoothly, materials are supplied in time, and we actually have a good time together because we fill out all the requirements, and actually we go home satisfied that we produced according to plan. That's how a good day looks like. Now, so that's a journey because in reality, there in any operation there is a variation. So when we get to 90% towards that having a good day every day, it's already a major breakthrough. And that's what it feels like. Because now it's like, okay, going from it's in other words, is going from a firefighting environment where we're missing supplies here, we have a breakdown. You get into a firefighting mode. That's where some companies' operations are at versus how I described the good day. So there obviously there's a it's a scale where you can measure. Okay, what does it feel like? Your question, which I really like. What does it feel like? Well, you're much better closer to having a good day. The machines are running. I can now think about, okay, next shift, next week. What can we do better? And that's where you can start see precision of execution. You see their progress being made. The example I gave earlier about 80 widgets an hour. Yeah, you're now getting closer to your 100 widgets an hour. And think about if you do that consistently, 168 hours a week. That then a lot of people are having a good day. Yeah.
Well, yeah, what I love about your answer is how it's not necessarily that they don't know what good feels like. It's that they get to experience it so rarely that it's like it's a unicorn, right? It hardly ever comes. And so when they get to the other side of a transformational journey like the ones that you lead, they get to experience it with more regularity, and they can start trying to find great days and start,
Yeah.
well, let's
Yeah.
get, we're having a lot of good days. How do we get some great days?
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
make these
Yeah.
days even better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also love that you describe it in days. So, all right. So let's talk about that. So you've got this vision of what 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 it's going to look like on the other side. So what are the challenges that leaders and companies face in getting there? Like, what are the roadblocks that keep them from being successful in a transformational journey of this type?
Um, the short answer is it's either capacity, so just lacking the available time within the organization to start the journey, to lead the journey, to think of the journey. So that's a matter of having the right time. Think about what I just described. Yeah, if you're in a firefighting mode, yeah, people are spending a lot of hours on a day-to-day basis just to get the products, the widgets out the door. And they're already happy. Okay, we managed this shift. Um, so there is not much capacity then left. In the other element is you need the right capabilities, because it's something that needs to be custom designed for this organization. Every organization is different, but the change journey can be. This is where it's very relevant to start a journey on the right ones, because there's not much options for failure. Because changing the way an organization is run takes a significant effort. So having dedicated effort, project managers that have done it, that know and can lead a journey that is specific to take everybody along within an organization. So this is where it typically lacks within an organization. It's both the capacity and the capability to lead that journey to get to that, describe it, precision of execution.
I imagine there's some companies out there that are saying, "Yeah, Andre, this all sounds great, but like the reason that we don't feel good days as frequently as we like is out of our control. Customer demand is all over the place. Market conditions are all over the place. And how, if everything would run the way we expect it to run, and we would hit good all the time. How do they deal with that? Like if that's what they're saying to you, how do you tell them, well, okay, here's that's maybe not true. So tell us what you think.
Yeah, it's a nice question because we get that as well, right? There is always even we're continuously now talking about an operation and how do you manage variation therein. But also they are dealing with an external market. And obviously, yeah, customer demand changes, supplier supplies, they vary. We've seen all the crises over the last few years, because COVID really shook up a lot of things. So that had a big impact on this external factor. But the biggest thing is once you have your operations within your organization within control, so you have what we call operational process controls. They are part of your precision of execution. Once you have that in place, and as an example, we talk about these KPIs, number of widgets per hour, you know you can produce 90 widgets per hour. So if demand changes, you become more reliable and you know, okay, next hour I only need, and next week I only need another volume. Now you can plan more precisely. So actually, you're more become actually as an organization more flexible to deal with changes in demand and can make changes to your product portfolio. Actually, you gain time. Can you imagine before organizations would need the full 168 hours per week to produce their weekly demand, but they were running at 65% efficiency. Now, with precision of execution, you get to a stage you're getting close to your 80 or 85 world-class level. So imagine how much more capacity you've gained. And this increase in capacity, either you can utilize it in flexibility, being able to switch product, or you can downscale so you can actually follow your market demand and actually put more effort into new product development. Bringing other customers in. So there is a lot of more opportunities that are on a bigger scale coming into the organization by having precision of execution.
I love your answer, and I'm curious when you think about this notion of measuring around the clock, measuring the right things around the clock more frequently. Um, I, I I assume that extends beyond the operational environment. So it also is measuring demand at that same pace and frequency to the best of your ability, right? So it's also about anticipating what's coming at you better than maybe you are now. Would you agree? Tell us
Oh,
more.
oh, yeah, absolutely. And then that's when you almost get to yeah, as an organization. Once it typically starts within operations. That's typically where it starts because yeah, it's like this is the buck stops here, right? Somewhere in the organization, the full flexibility. Yeah, at the end, it stops somewhere, and typically that's a manufacturing and operations environment because the demand is longer term. So within operations, that's where it starts. But once you have that under control, now what I was mentioning earlier about having the ability to develop, you could use your resources. You're actually getting your own resources available to develop new products and extend, also starting to measure new product development and marketing and sales with the same precision of execution. Now we can ask, as executives can really start asking questions. Okay, why didn't we get those orders? Why? So you get to more KPIs and more information, more data-driven organization that extends. It starts with operations, but it will extend to other functions over time. And depending on how fast and how ready an organization is to take that on board, absolutely. But typically, what we see the first step after operations is supply chain. When it gets into planning and scheduling, when it gets into the warehousing and logistic functions, because direct impact on customers. And indeed, the next level is marketing, sales, finance, you name it.
So I have two more questions for you before we run out of time, which is the first one is, um, what would you say to an operations leader that's, embracing a culture of precision execution for the first time? So if this is sort of their first go round or they're trying to reinvigorate a failed initiative, what advice would you give them to be successful?
Good question. Because it depends. I don't like the answer. But when it's like obviously it's knowing your organization, knowing your operations. So have that right guidance of where to start, because it typically starts small. I mean, it typically start embracing it on one line, one production area, and start to see how it can scale up relatively quickly. We're also within your organization. Um, Second is, once you really know in which part of the organization to start executing on it. Second is, do you have the right resources? And that's not just available resources, but it's also in terms of capabilities. Because change is not easy. And be ready for, um, yeah, for the valley, basically, when there is the demotivation valley, where, because you will obviously go through it, because people expect things to go much faster. Um, than actually the reality is going to be. So make sure you're able to embrace for going through that valley of despair, I would call it, where, oh yeah, it's more difficult than we thought. So having the right resources and support is the big challenge that they need to face. Um, and this is a challenge when you're in a situation with firefighting, as mentioned earlier. People have a day job as well. Anybody you pull into that project, which is a project work, but you need dedicated time in that project work from a lot of resources. I mean, just a few, but you need dedicated resources that are committed to the change journey and um, to guide them through it. So again, capability and availability are critical to get the right people on board. And but like we started the call earlier, it's at a certain moment we're getting into the situation. Oh, now we're having good days, and actually, you will gain the time and energy, and it will be back with you in a couple of months. Think about this as a journey that can take anywhere between 3 to 9 months, typically. Yeah. But then you're in a situation, like you call them, you're having good and great days, and already when you start having a good day, it should have been a great day. So yeah, that's so the having the right resources and commitment, which is back to our number one from our precision of execution's top 5 items, is the support from the top. And if that is not there, it's not even going to happen.
All right. So last question is one of TBM's sort of like foundational belief systems is the belief in speed.
Yeah,
The idea of that if you can make an organization go faster,
yeah,
you create growth opportunities. On the surface, it feels like speed and precision are at odds with each other.
yeah.
Um, would you agree? I'm guessing you won't. Tell
No,
us,
uh,
tell us
I
what you'd say about that.
no, and I understand the logic when you say, if we do everything precise, with precision, I'd like to turn it around. If you do everything with precision, it means you're doing it first time right. Doing it first time right, you don't have rework. Think about it again in the example of producing 80 widgets. Yeah, if you lost 5 due to not having the right quality at the end of the line, that's 5 widgets where you put effort, resources, material, everything's in there. So that's the big driving factor. If you do everything first time right, is the biggest answer to precision of execution. Um, will you have waste in this journey? Absolutely. Um, but once you have that precision of execution, you do things right, and you gain time and material. So I think there's not another option. You need to do things right, because it's basically our founding principles are on the Toyota production system, which is all about lean and eliminating waste from a production process, any process, and removing that waste from your process. Time is a big waster, and that's
Mhm.
where our connection to speed comes back in. Imagine those 5 widgets that we would have been lost are now back in, and so you're producing more faster than you've ever done before. So
I love that answer. I love the notion of first time right in the sense of, when you bring this level of precision, you bring this level of measurement, you bring this level of frequency, um, you you enable yourself to go faster because now you know that the process is right, you know the behaviors are right, you know the capabilities are there, and so now when you try to accelerate it, you can accelerate it more effectively
Yeah,
because everything's right. I love it. Well, thank you, Andre, for your time. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.
for sure, Jason. Thank you very much, and have a good day.